She didn't cry when they slammed the door in her face. She didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't make a sound. She just stood there in the freezing dark coat, two thin hands, shaking a little girl waiting at home with an empty stomach, and felt the last door in Dustfall Creek close against her. But then a voice came out of the cold, low, steady, like a man who had nothing to prove. And everything she thought she knew about strangers, about kindness, about who she was allowed to be, was about to change forever. If a story like this deserves to be told, drop your city in the comments below. I want to know how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what happens next? You are going to want to see through to the very end. The wind off the Montana plains didn't just bite in December, it swallowed you whole. Clara Whitmore had lived through 3 winters in Dustfall Creek since Thomas died, and she knew exactly what kind of cold this was, the kind that didn't care how strong you thought you were, the kind that found every crack in your coat, every worn-through patch in your boots, every moment you let your guard down. She pulled her shawl tighter and pushed open the door to Griggs' general store. The bell above the door jingled. Harold Griggs looked up from behind the counter. His expression didn't change, not exactly, but something shifted in his eyes, that small, almost invisible tightening around the corners that Clara had learned to read the way a sailor reads weather. She was not welcome here. She came anyway. "Evening, Mr. Griggs. Mrs. Whitmore." He said her name the way some men say problem. She set her list on the counter: flour, salt, dried beans, a small block of lard. She had written it 3 times before she left the house. Crossed things off, added them back. Crossed them off again. 4 items. That was all. 4 items to get Lily through the next 2 weeks. "I was hoping," she started, and she hated how her voice dipped just slightly, "to add this to my account. Until the end of the month. My sewing work for Mrs. Patterson should be done by your account." Griggs said it flatly, not a question. "Yes, sir." He reached under the counter and pulled out a worn leather ledger. He opened it slowly, almost deliberately, the way a man opens something he already knows the answer to. His finger traced down a column and stopped. "You're already carrying $11.40, Mrs. Whitmore." "I know, and I intend to." "That's not a small sum." "No, sir, it isn't. You understand I run a business, not a charity house." The word charity landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Clara felt the ripple of it move through her chest. She kept her face still. She had practiced keeping her face still. "I understand that completely, Mr. Griggs, and I've always paid my debts, every one of them. You know that." He closed the ledger. "Times are tight for everyone." "They are," she agreed. "Which is why I'm asking. Not for mercy. For a few weeks." Griggs looked past her, then just slightly, just enough, and Clara became aware, the way you become aware of a fire starting at the edge of a room, that there were other people in the store. Ed Barker from the feed mill, loading a sack near the back wall. Old Ruth Hensley at the fabric bolts. Tom Pruitt's wife, Eleanor, holding a tin of baking powder and pretending to read the label. They were all listening. And Harold Griggs knew it. Something in him straightened. Something performed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I can't extend credit I have no confidence in. You've got no income, no collateral, and no husband to stand behind the account. That's just the hard truth of it. No husband to stand behind the account." Clara heard Eleanor Pruitt inhale softly near the fabric bolts. She heard it. She heard every single syllable of what Harold Griggs had just said, and what it meant, and what every person in that store now understood about who she was and what she was worth in the eyes of Dustfall Creek. A widow with no backing, a liability, a burden wearing a woman's coat. "I see," Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. She would not let it shake. She picked up her list from the counter. She folded it once, twice. She put it in her coat pocket. "Good evening, Mr. Griggs." She walked to the door. She pushed it open. The cold hit her like a wall, and behind her, as the bell jingled, she heard Ed Barker's low voice rumble something to Eleanor Pruitt. She didn't catch the words. She didn't need to. Outside, the street was mostly empty. A buckboard moved slowly at the far end. Two men stood talking outside the saloon, their breath fogging in the lamplight. A dog barked somewhere in the dark and went quiet. Clara stood on the porch of Griggs' General Store and breathed. Just breathed. The cold went straight through her bone deep, the kind that made her teeth want to clench. She didn't let them. She pressed her jaw tight and breathed through her nose and looked down the long, dark street of Dustfall Creek and thought about Lily. Lily, who was 7 years old. Lily, who had eaten the last of the oatmeal that morning, and who had asked in that careful way children ask when they already sense the answer whether there would be soup for dinner. Clara had told her yes. She had said it without hesitating, because you do not make a 7-year-old carry the weight of $11.40 at the end of December. You just don't. And so now Clara stood on the porch and thought about what yes was going to look like tonight, and she couldn't see it. She turned it over and over in her mind, the way you turn a stone looking for something underneath. And there was nothing there. Mrs. Patterson's money wouldn't come until the work was finished, and the work wasn't finished. The neighbors had their own troubles. She couldn't ask again, not after last month. The church barrel had been empty for 2 weeks. She had traded the last of Thomas's tools in October. There was nothing left to trade, nothing left to borrow against, and the night was getting colder by the minute, and somewhere across town, her daughter was waiting for soup. Clara pressed her fist against her sternum hard, the way you press against a bruise, to remind yourself you can still feel it. Then she stepped off the porch and started walking home. She heard the boots before she heard the voice. Heavy, even, not rushing. "Ma'am." She kept walking. "Ma'am, hold on just a moment." Something in the way he said it, not demanding, not commanding, just asking, made her slow down. She didn't stop, but she slowed. "I'm not in the business of bothering folks," the voice said closer now. "But I saw what happened in there, and I've got a question for you if you'll allow it." Clara stopped. She turned around. He was tall, not dramatically so, but enough that she had to tilt her chin slightly to meet his eyes. His coat was heavy canvas trail-worn, the kind of coat that had seen real weather, and didn't try to look like it hadn't. He had a hat pulled low against the wind, and beneath it a face that was probably in its late 30s, hard to place exactly, because it was one of those faces that had been outside too long and too often, and had taken on a kind of permanent weathered quality that made age irrelevant. His eyes were gray, or blue, hard to tell in the dark. They were looking at her directly. Not the way men in saloons looked at women directly. The other way, the straightforward, unguarded way, the way that meant he wasn't trying to impress her, or intimidate her, or figure out what she might be worth to him. He was just looking. "My question," he said, "is whether there's anybody waiting on you tonight." Clara's chest tightened. "That is none of your—" "I'm asking," he said quietly, "because if there isn't, you can tell me to mind my business, and I will. But if there is, if there's somebody at home who needs something, then maybe you'll let me help with that, just tonight, no conditions." She stared at him. "I don't know you," she said. "No, you don't. My name's Wade Callahan. I've been passing through on my way north, got delayed by the weather. I've been staying at the boarding house 3 nights now." He paused. "Mrs. Calloway runs it. You can ask her about me if you'd like. She'll tell you I'm boring and that I eat too much of her bread." Clara did not smile, but something in her posture shifted just a fraction. "Why would you help a stranger?" she said. "You don't know me either." "No," Wade said. "I don't. But I know what I just watched in that store, and I know what it costs a person to walk out of somewhere like that with their head up the way you did." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been on the wrong side of a closed door before, ma'am. Most folks have. I'm just in a position tonight where I can do something about it." The wind picked up. Clara pulled her coat tighter. She thought about Lily, about soup, about the word yes she had already spoken into the dark of their cold kitchen. "There's a little girl," she said finally. "My daughter. She's 7. "All right," Wade said simply. "I'm not taking charity. I'm not offering it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then what are you offering?" "A trip back into that store. And I'll stand at that counter with you, and we'll put your things on my account, and you can pay me back whenever you're able, and however you're able. And if you never are, then that's between you and God, and I won't say a word about it either way." Clara felt something crack open in her chest. She didn't know what to do with that. The generosity of it was so plain, so unadorned, so completely without performance, that she almost didn't recognize it. She was so accustomed to help coming wrapped in conditions, in debt, in obligation, in the need for gratitude, to be displayed a certain way, at a certain volume, that help offered this quietly felt almost suspicious. "Why?" she said again. Wade tilted his head slightly. "Because no one who fights this hard should go home empty," he said. "That's all." Clara Whitmore stood in the freezing street of Dustfall Creek. She thought of every reason to say no. She said yes. They walked back to Griggs' general store together. When the bell above the door jingled the second time, Harold Griggs looked up, and this time his expression did change. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Men like Griggs didn't do guilt in public. But something close to recalculation, the rapid behind-the-eyes arithmetic of a man measuring a situation. Because Wade Callahan did not look like a man you dismissed lightly. It wasn't the size of him exactly. It was something in the way he carried himself, loose, unhurried, completely unbothered, that communicated without a single word being spoken, that this was someone who was comfortable with whatever was about to happen next. He walked to the counter. He set his hat on it. "Evening," he said. "Evening," said Griggs, cautious now. "This lady needs flour, salt, dried beans, and lard." Wade looked at Clara. "That right?" "Yes," Clara said. Her heart was hammering. She kept her face still. "Put it on my account," Wade said. "Wade Callahan. I've been staying at Calloway's." Griggs glanced at Clara, then back at Wade. "That's your business," Griggs said carefully. "But I should mention that Mrs. Whitmore already has an account here that's—" "I know about her account," Wade said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lower it either. He simply said it with the kind of finality that made continuing the sentence feel unnecessary. "My account, please." A beat of silence. Ed Barker had stopped moving near the back wall. Eleanor Pruitt was very still near the fabric bolts. Griggs pulled out a new ledger page. He wrote Wade's name. He filled the order. Clara watched Harold Griggs wrap her flour and her salt and her dried beans and her lard in brown paper and tie it with string, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt like a person, not a widow, not an account number, not a problem, not a charity case. A person standing at a counter buying groceries, going home to feed her daughter. It was such a small thing. It was enormous. Outside again, the night was just as cold, but it felt different. She was carrying something now, 4 items wrapped in brown paper, the weight of them real and solid in her arms. Wade carried the flour, which was heaviest. He didn't ask to, he just picked it up. They walked. She didn't know what to say, so she said, "I live on Birch Road," past the smithy, and then left. "All right," he said. They walked in silence for half a block, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. I mean what you said, about paying you back. You don't—" "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was gentle but settled. "I didn't say it to be polite. I said it because I meant it. We don't need to discuss it anymore tonight." Clara pressed her lips together. "I'm not good at accepting help," she said. "I noticed," he said. And there was the faintest thing in his voice, not quite a smile, but close to it, You nearly talked yourself out of it 4 different ways before you said yes. She blinked. You counted, nothing else to do while I was waiting. She looked at him sideways. You were very sure I'd say yes. No, he said. I wasn't sure at all, but I figured the worst you could say was no, and I'd already heard worse tonight. She frowned. What did you hear worse tonight? He was quiet for a moment. The way Griggs said no husband to stand behind the account, like you were supposed to feel ashamed of that. Clara stopped walking. She didn't mean to. Her feet just stopped. Wade stopped too, a half step ahead of her, and turned. In the dark, with the lamplight from a distant window catching the edge of his face, she could see that his jaw was set. Not angry, not performing anger, not the theatrical outrage men sometimes use to make themselves seem heroic. Just honestly bothered. The way a decent person is bothered by something indecent. You heard that, she said. Hard not to. I thought... She stopped. I thought no one would... They all heard it, Mrs. Whitmore. They just didn't say anything. Something hot moved through her chest. Not tears she was past crying in public had been for 2 years. Just heat. Just the old familiar burn of being seen clearly in the wrong moment. And that bothered you, she said. A stranger's business in a store. It bothered me, he said simply, because it was wrong. He said it the way you state a fact, not a speech, not a declaration. Just it was wrong. The same way you'd say the sky is cold tonight, or that road goes north. Clara picked up her feet again and started walking. She didn't trust herself to say anything else just yet. They turned left past the smithy. The house at the end of the lane was small, smaller than it had been when Thomas was alive somehow, even though the walls hadn't moved. Funny how a house can shrink when the life goes out of it. Light glowed faintly in one window. Lily. She'd left the lamp on for her. Clara's chest ached with something she couldn't quite name, love and relief, and a mother's specific animal gratitude at seeing the light her child is living by. She stopped at the gate. This is it, she said. Good, Wade said. He held out the flower. She took it. Both arms full now, she fumbled slightly, and he reached out just a steadying hand at her elbow and then moved back immediately. Gave her the space back. Thank you, she said. Mr. Callahan. Wade, he said. She looked at him. If it's all the same, he said. Just Wade is fine. She considered that. Clara, she said. He nodded. Put his hat back in place. He was turning to go when the front door of the house swung open and a small person in a too big wool nightgown appeared in the rectangle of lamplight. Mama. I'm here, Lily Bird. Clara moved fast now through the gate up the path. Go inside, it's freezing. Lily did not go inside. She stood in the doorway and looked past Clara at the tall man standing at the gate with the frank, unguarded appraisal that only very young children and very old dogs apply to strangers. Who's that? She said. His name is Mr. Callahan, Clara said. He helped Mama tonight. Lily regarded Wade for a long moment. Then she looked at the packages in her mother's arms. Then she looked back at Wade. Did you bring food? She asked. Clara nearly closed her eyes. Lily? Yes, Wade said. He said it without a flicker of discomfort, without any of the performance adults usually attach to questions from children. Just yes. Matter of fact. As if being asked by a 7-year-old whether he'd brought food was a perfectly reasonable question, with a perfectly reasonable answer. Lily considered this. Thank you, she said gravely. You're welcome, he said, equally grave. Then Lily turned and disappeared back into the house, apparently satisfied. Clara stood at the door and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years of keeping her face still and her voice steady and her chin level in front of the Harold Griggses of the world. She felt her throat get tight. She turned back to say goodnight, and she found Wade already walking away down the lane, not looking back, not waiting for gratitude, just walking his coat dark against the dark. "Mr. Callahan," she called. He stopped, turned. "Wade," she corrected herself. Her voice was rough at the edges. Why?" "Really? Why would you do this for someone you don't know?" He stood there in the cold lane for a moment, and then he said something she would think about for a long time afterward. "Because somebody did it for me once," he said. "A long time ago, when I had nothing and the door was closed and I didn't know what came next." A pause. "I've been trying to pass it along ever since. Just takes the right night." He turned and walked away. Clara stood in her doorway and watched him go. The cold pressed in around her. Inside, Lily was singing something soft and tuneless to herself, the way she did when she was happy. Clara stepped inside and closed the door. She made soup. Not great soup. Dried beans take time, and she didn't have time, so she used the lard and the salt and some old dried herbs from the end of summer, and she made it work. She made it warm. She made it enough. Lily ate 2 bowls and talked through all of it about a rabbit she'd seen near the fence that morning, and whether rabbits got cold at night, and whether they had families. Clara answered every question. After she put Lily to bed and sat alone by the stove, she allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel everything she had been holding back, since Harold Griggs said no husband to stand behind the account in front of everyone in his store. She pressed her hands flat on her knees. She breathed. She let the heat of the stove and the sound of Lily sleeping in the next room and the smell of the last of the soup do their work. And then she straightened. Because the thing about Clara Whitmore, the thing that Dustfall Creek had never fully understood about her, not in the year before Thomas died, and not in the 2 years since, was that she was not weak. She had never been weak. She was poor and tired and alone, and those things were true, and they were real, and they were heavy. But they were not weakness. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, someone had seen that. Just seen it clearly, without asking for anything in return. She sat by the stove until the fire burned low. She thought about Wade Callahan walking away down the lane. About a door that had been closed for 2 years. About what it felt like when someone said no one who fights this hard should go home empty. She thought about all of it. And then she banked the fire and checked the latch on the door and went to bed. She did not know, could not have known that morning was going to bring something harder. That the kindness of one night was about to cost her something she wasn't prepared to pay. That Dustfall Creek was watching. And that Dustfall Creek had long, cold, unforgiving eyes. The next morning came gray and bitter the way December mornings in Dustfall Creek always did, like the sky had decided overnight that it owed nobody anything. Clara was up before Lily. She always was. She stirred the stove back to life, put water on to heat, and stood in her kitchen, listening to the sound of the wind pressing against the walls of a house that had been leaking cold air through the north corner since October. She pressed her palm flat against that corner and felt the draft move through her fingers like something alive. She needed to fix that. She had needed to fix it for 6 weeks. She didn't know how. Thomas had known how to do everything: the walls, the roof, the fence line, the frozen pump handle that required exactly the right angle of persuasion on cold mornings. He'd known this house the way a doctor knows a patient, understood every complaint and weakness, every place that would cause trouble if you ignored it long enough. And now Clara knew it differently. She knew it the way you learn someone's absence. By feeling every place they used to be. She was still standing with her palm against the cold corner when someone knocked on the door. She went still. Nobody knocked on her door before sunrise. She crossed to it and opened it a careful 3 inches, keeping her body in the gap. It was Wade Callahan. He was holding a wooden toolbox. Clara stared at him. He looked at her, then at the gap, then back at her. "Morning," he said. "It's barely light," she said. "I know. I figured you'd be up." A pause. "I also figured you'd argue with me if I gave you too much time to think about it, so I came early." Clara opened the door another inch. Just one. Argue with you about what exactly? I walked past your place last night on my way back to Calloway's, he said. I could see the gap in your north wall from the lane. Wind, like we're going to get this week, that corner's going to be a problem. She felt her jaw tighten. I'm aware of the corner. I know you are, he said, simply, without the condescension she'd braced for. I'm just saying I can fix it. It won't take more than an hour. You don't have to feed me or thank me. You can stand there and supervise and make sure I do it right if that makes you feel better. Lily appeared behind Clara's right knee. She looked up at Wade with those direct brown eyes. You came back, Lily said. I did, he said. Did you eat breakfast? Lily? Clara said. Mama makes good oatmeal, Lily said seriously. A silence settled over the three of them. Clara felt it, that specific pressure of a moment asking her to decide something. She thought about the corner. She thought about the week of cold weather coming. She thought about her 7-year-old daughter standing barefoot on a drafty floor, inviting a stranger to breakfast with the absolute moral certainty of someone who had not yet learned to be suspicious of kindness. Clara stepped back from the door. Wipe your boots, she said. He fixed the corner in 40 minutes. He didn't make noise about it, didn't narrate what he was doing or ask for tools or complain about the angle. He just worked methodical and quiet the way a person works when they know what they're doing and don't need anyone to watch them do it. Clara made oatmeal. Lily sat at the table and explained to Wade in considerable detail the full biography of the rabbit she'd seen near the fence. Wade listened to all of it. He asked 2 questions. Both of them exactly the right questions, whether the rabbit had been alone and whether it had looked scared or just busy, and Lily considered them with the gravity they deserved before answering. When he was done with the wall, he came and sat at the table because Lily had set a bowl across from hers without asking anyone's permission. Clara put the oatmeal in front of him. She sat down. For a moment, the three of them just ate. It was the strangest thing, the silence of it. Not uncomfortable, not performing, just 3 people around a table in the morning, which was something so ordinary that Clara had almost forgotten it could feel like something. The corner will hold, Wade said. But you've got a seam along the roofline on the east side that's going to open up when the heavy snow comes. That'll be harder to fix from the inside. I know, Clara said. He looked at her, not pressing, just looking. I haven't figured that one out yet, she said. I could look at it, he said. From the outside. Tomorrow maybe if the weather holds. Clara set her spoon down. She looked at him across the table, this man she had known for less than 24 hours, sitting in her kitchen eating her oatmeal, while her daughter explained rabbit sociology to him. Why are you still here? She said. You said you were passing through. I am, he said. Then why? Because I'm not in a hurry, he said. And you've got a roof seam that needs attention before the snow comes. He paused. Those are the only 2 reasons. I'm not going to make them more complicated than they are. Clara looked at him for a long moment. People are going to talk, she said quietly so Lily wouldn't fully catch it. Something moved across his face, not surprise, more like acknowledgement, like he'd already considered it. People talked last night, he said. I imagine they'll keep talking whether I fix your roof or not. It's not the same. No, he agreed. It's not. He was quiet. But it's your call, Clara. I mean that. You say no, I finish my oatmeal and I don't come back, and that's the end of it. She didn't say no. She didn't say yes either. She picked her spoon back up and ate her oatmeal and let the morning settle around the 3 of them, and if that was a decision, it was the quietest one she had ever made. By the end of that week, Dustfall Creek had noticed. It started the way things always started in a town that small, not with a declaration but with a look. A held gaze across the street. A conversation that stopped a half-beat too late when Clara walked past. A question asked of a third party rather than directly. Who is that man fixing the Whitmore widow's fence? Clara heard about it from Martha Hensley, who was the kind of woman who delivered gossip the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, reluctantly for your own good, and with genuine concern underneath the discomfort of having to say it. "People are talking, Clara," Martha said. They were standing outside the post office, and Martha had dropped her voice the way you drop your voice when the words themselves need to be said quietly, to be kind. "I know," Clara said. "Ed Barker told his wife, you've had that man at your house 3 mornings this week. He's fixing the roof seam, in the daytime, with my daughter home." "I know that." Martha's expression was genuinely pained. "I'm not saying what they're saying is true. I'm saying they're saying it." Clara looked down the street. She could see the front of Griggs' General Store 3 blocks away. She could see without seeing Harold Griggs behind his counter with his ledger and his judgment, and his very particular understanding of who in this town had value and who did not. "What are they saying, Martha?" she said. "Exactly." Martha hesitated. "That a woman in your position can't afford to be careless with her reputation," she said carefully. "That a stranger showing up with tools and kindness, they say it like it's suspicious, doesn't do that without wanting something." "Wade Callahan hasn't asked me for a single thing," Clara said. "I believe you." "Do you?" Martha's chin came up slightly. "Yes, I do. But Clara, I'm not everyone." Clara stood there in the cold and felt the truth of that move through her, like the draft through her north wall. She knew Martha meant well. She knew in the fair part of her heart that Martha was right, not about Wade, but about how a town like Dustfall Creek read a story like this one. A widow, a drifter, mornings at her house. It didn't matter what was true. What mattered was what it looked like, and what it looked like was exactly what small-minded people wanted it to look like. "Thank you for telling me," Clara said. She walked home. She thought about what she was going to say to Wade. She thought about it the whole way, and by the time she got to her gate, she had it worked out a careful, reasonable, not unkind explanation of why this had to stop. She would thank him. She would mean it. She would send him on his way north, and that would be that. He was on the roof when she arrived. She could hear him up there, the measured tap of a hammer working along the east seam, steady and unhurried. "Wade," she called. The tapping stopped. A moment later, his face appeared at the roofline. "Almost done up here," he said. "Another 20 minutes. I need to talk to you," she said. "When you're down." Something in her voice must have carried something. He studied her for a half-second. "All right," he said, and went back to work. She went inside and put the kettle on. She stood at the window and watched Lily in the side yard crouched near the fence line, completely still, apparently waiting for her rabbit. 20 minutes. 22. She heard his boots on the ladder, and then the crunch of him landing, and then his knock at the door. "Come in," she said. He came in. He took his hat off. He looked at her face and didn't say anything. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She poured the coffee. She sat across from him, and she delivered her careful, reasonable, not unkind speech about reputation, and how a town like this one worked, and how she had a daughter to think about, and she couldn't afford to give people ammunition they would use for years. She said all of it. He listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. "All right," he said. She blinked. "All right. You've thought it through. I'm not going to argue with you about your own life." He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "But I want to ask you one thing, and I want you to tell me the truth." She waited. "Do you believe," he said carefully, "that what people are saying about you is true? Not whether they're saying it. Whether you believe it." Clara looked at him. "No," she said. "I know what this is." "Then you already know what it costs you to care what they think," he said. "I'm not telling you the cost is worth it. That's your math to do. I'm just saying make sure you're deciding for yourself, not for Harold Griggs." The name landed in the room like something dropped. Clara felt her jaw tighten. Because there it was, the thing she hadn't wanted to see clearly. That the voice telling her to send Wade Callahan away was not her own voice. It was Griggs's voice, and Eleanor Pruitt's voice, and the whole accumulated weight of Dustfall Creek's opinion of who Clara Whitmore was and what she was allowed to have. She sat with that for a long moment. "That's not fair," she said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She looked out the window at Lily still crouched at the fence, with the patience of a small, determined saint. "The roof," she said finally. "Is it done?" "East seam is solid," he said. "You'll be all right through the winter now." She nodded. She drank her coffee. She did not tell him to go. What she did not know, what she could not have seen, was that the conversation was already over before it started. Because Eleanor Pruitt had walked past Clara's lane at the exact moment Wade climbed down from the roof, and she had seen it him at the top of the ladder, Clara at the gate, the exchange that passed between them, even at a distance. And Eleanor Pruitt had walked directly to Griggs' general store, and said something to Harold Griggs that made him set his pen down and look up with an expression that was not quite anger and not quite satisfaction, but lived somewhere in the narrow space between. That evening, two things happened. First, Lily found her rabbit. She came in the door with her eyes wide and her voice barely below a shout, pulling Clara by the hand back out into the cold to show her there pressed into the space between the fence post and the frozen ground, a small brown rabbit in a hollow of dead grass, completely still watching them with one bright eye. "She made a house," Lily whispered. "She did," Clara whispered back. "Is she cold?" "I think she's all right. She knows how to keep warm." Lily studied the rabbit for a long time. Then she looked up at her mother. "Do we know how to keep warm, Mama?" Clara felt something move through her chest, that particular piercing kind of feeling that only your own child can produce, asking something innocent that lands in the exact center of something that is not innocent at all. "We're learning," Clara said. Second, someone pushed a folded piece of paper under her door. She found it after Lily was asleep, a small square of paper on the floor near the threshold. She picked it up, unfolded it. The handwriting was blocky, deliberate. Someone who hadn't been schooled but had practiced. A woman in your position should think careful about the company she keeps. Some strangers are only passing through. Others leave things behind them that don't wash off. Be smart. People are watching. No signature. Clara read it twice. Then she folded it. She held it in both hands for a moment, and then she crossed to the stove and opened the door and put it in. She watched it catch and burn. She closed the stove. She sat back down. Her hands were completely steady. She told Wade about it the next morning. She hadn't planned to. She'd decided somewhere in the night that she wouldn't, that it would only make things complicated or worse, that it would make him feel responsible, and he wasn't responsible, and she didn't want him to feel that way. But he knocked at 7:30, and she opened the door, and he looked at her face and said, "What happened?" Just that, just what happened, as if he could read the faint print of a hard night directly off her expression. She told him. He listened without moving, without the thunder face men sometimes put on when they want you to know they're angry on your behalf. He just listened, and when she was done he said, "Did it scare you?" "No," she said, and meant it. He nodded slowly. "It was meant to," he said. "That's the whole point of a note like that. It's not a warning. It's a test. To see if you'll flinch." "I know what it was," she said. "I know you do." He was quiet. "Clara, if you want me to go, if this is making your life harder and the cost isn't worth it, I will go. I mean it. No argument." She looked at him. "If you go," she said slowly, "it's because I decided that. Not because someone pushed a piece of paper under my door in the dark." Something shifted in his face. It was subtle, a slight easing around his eyes. The faintest thing, the way a man looks when he hears something he hadn't expected to hear, and it lands somewhere, it matters. All right, he said. Besides, Clara said, and she turned back to the stove. The water pump on the south side has been freezing overnight. I was going to try to fix it myself, but I'll probably just break it. A pause. I know about pumps, he said. I assumed, she said. And just like that, just that simply, that quietly, something settled between them that hadn't been settled before. Not declared, not named, just present, the way heat is present in a room after you've been in from the cold long enough. Lily came out of the bedroom in her nightgown, took one look at Wade standing in the doorway, and said, "Are you staying for oatmeal again?" "If there's enough," he said. "There's always enough," Lily said firmly, with the authority of someone who has decided this is simply true and plans to make it so. Clara's back was to both of them. She let herself smile at the stove where no one could see it. Outside, the wind had come back pressing against the north wall. But the corner held. The corner held. What Clara did not see, what she had no reason to look for, was Harold Griggs standing at his store window that same morning watching Wade Callahan walk down Birch Road toward her house. Watching. Thinking. And beside him Ed Barker, who had stopped in early for tobacco, saying in that low, flat voice of his, "You know what folks are starting to call him, the widow's man, right here in town." Griggs said nothing. He just watched. And the thing in his eyes was no longer recalculation. It was something that had made its decision, and was waiting for the right moment. The pump got fixed by mid-morning. Wade had a way with frozen metal patient, methodical, the kind of patience that doesn't announce itself or look for credit. He worked the handle at exactly the right angle, applied heat from a wrapped cloth in exactly the right place, and within 40 minutes the water ran clean and steady, and Clara stood there watching it like it was something remarkable, which it was, because she had been hauling water from the neighbor's well for 11 days and hadn't told anyone. "You should have said something sooner," Wade said. "I manage," Clara said. He looked at her. That look she was starting to recognize, direct, unhurried, not pushing, but not letting it go entirely either. "I know you manage," he said. "That's not what I said." She met his eyes. "I don't like asking." "I know that too." He dried his hands on a rag. "There's a difference between asking and just saying a thing out loud. You don't have to do every hard thing in silence, Clara." She didn't answer that, but she heard it. She turned back to the running pump and let the sound of the water fill the space between them, and she thought about how long she had been doing hard things in silence, not because she was proud exactly, but because silence had become the only safe container for difficulty. The moment you spoke your troubles out loud in a town like Dustfall Creek, they stopped being yours and became everyone's property, everyone's opinion, everyone's evidence. She had learned that the year Thomas died. She had not unlearned it yet. It was 2 days later that Harold Griggs made his move. He did it publicly. He had planned it that way. Clara understood that afterward, looking back at the timing and the location and the specific audience he had arranged, the way you understand the architecture of something once you can see the whole shape of it. She was at the post office. Mid-morning, moderate foot traffic, enough witnesses for his purposes, but not so crowded that the moment would get lost. He came in behind her. She heard him turned, and the expression on his face was the one she'd seen men wear when they had decided to perform something and had already rehearsed it to their own satisfaction. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, loud enough. "I've been meaning to speak with you." The post office went quiet in the particular way of small spaces when something is about to happen. Clara turned to face him fully. "Mr. Griggs." "I've had some concerns brought to my attention," he said, "by several members of this community, people who care about the character of this town." "Is that so?" Clara said. Her voice was level. "It is." He stepped closer, not threatening exactly, but close enough to make the move felt. "The man who's been at your property. Callahan. You know he's got no roots here, no history. Nobody in Dustfall Creek knows a thing about him except what he's chosen to show. He's been helping me with repairs, Clara said. So I've heard. The way he said it made helping sound like something that required quotation marks around it. My concern, and I want you to understand, this comes from a genuine place Mrs. Whitmore is for your daughter. A child without a father is already vulnerable. Bringing a stranger into that situation, giving him access to your home and your family. He fixed my roof, Clara said, and my pump, in the daytime, with my daughter present. Clara. He used her first name like a hand placed on her shoulder without permission. You're a young widow. You're lonely. That's not a criticism, it's simply human. Men like Callahan know how to read a situation. They know what a woman in your position needs to hear. Something cold moved through her. Not fear. Something harder than fear. She looked at Harold Griggs and saw him clearly, not for the first time, but more clearly than before, the way objects come into focus when you're standing at exactly the right distance. She saw a man who had never once in his entire life in Dustfall Creek offered her a single thing without attaching something to it. Not credit, not courtesy, not the basic dignity of being spoken to without an audience. And what, she said quietly, does a woman in my position need to hear, Mr. Griggs? His jaw shifted slightly. He hadn't expected the question back. That she should be careful, he said. I am careful, she said. I've been careful for 2 years without anyone's help. I've been careful every time I walked into your store and asked for what I needed, and watched you decide in front of everyone what I was worth. Her voice was still quiet. She wasn't performing. She was just saying things that were true. Wade Callahan has fixed 4 things on my property in 2 weeks, and has never once made me feel like I owed him more than I could give. Can you say the same? Griggs's face went tight. This isn't about what I've done, he said. No, Clara agreed. It's about what he's done, which has helped me, and the only thing about that which seems to bother people in this town is that they didn't get to decide whether I deserve it. She took her mail from the counter. She walked out. Behind her, she heard the post office stay quiet for a beat too long. Then the sound of voices starting up again, low and rapid, the specific frequency of a town reconsidering something. She was shaking by the time she got to the end of the block. Not from fear, she knew that now knew the difference. From the effort of holding something very large, very still inside herself, while she said what she needed to say. She didn't realize she'd stopped walking until she heard his voice. That was something to see, Wade said. She turned. He was leaning against the wall of the hardware store, arms folded, hat pulled low. He had clearly been heading somewhere, run into the post office situation from the outside, and had apparently decided to wait. You heard that, she said. Most of it. These walls aren't thick. She looked at him. I shouldn't have said it. Why? Because now he's angry. He was already angry, Wade said. He just wasn't showing it yet. He straightened up, unfolded his arms. Clara, what you just said in there, that was the truth. You don't have to apologize for saying true things. I'm not apologizing, she said. I'm being practical. He's got influence in this town that I don't have. He can make things harder. He can try, Wade said simply. She looked at him for a long moment. Doesn't anything worry you? He considered that, genuinely considered it, which she appreciated. He didn't dismiss the question or wave it off with false confidence. Sure, he said. Plenty of things worry me, but Griggs isn't one of them. He paused. Men who do things in front of audiences are usually only comfortable in front of audiences. Take the audience away, and most of them don't know what to do. She thought about that. Stay for supper tonight, she said. It came out before she'd fully decided to say it. She heard it land in the air between them, and felt the slight heat of it. Not embarrassment exactly, more like the vulnerability of a door opened without planning to open it. Wade looked at her, not surprised, not making it bigger than it was. "All right," he said. Supper was bread and beans and the last of the dried apple slices from the root cellar, and Lily ate like she hadn't seen food in a week, which was its own kind of grace, the way children eat without self-consciousness, without wondering if the meal is enough or good enough, just eating with their whole attention because the food is there and they are hungry, and that is sufficient. Wade ate the same way. Clara noticed that. He didn't comment on what there was or wasn't. He ate what was in front of him and asked Lily about the rabbit and listened to the answer with complete attention. "She's got a name now," Lily said. "Does she?" Wade said. "Margaret." Wade considered this seriously. "That's a good name for a rabbit." "I think so too," Lily said. "Mama said I can't bring her inside, but I put some oats near her house, so she knows we're friendly." "Smart," Wade said. Clara sat at the end of the table and felt the particular, almost unbearable tenderness of watching her daughter be fully unguardedly happy. It was a kind of pain almost, that specific ache of wanting something to stay exactly as it is, knowing nothing stays. After Lily was in bed, she and Wade sat at the table with the last of the coffee and the lamp burning low. "He's going to do something," Clara said. "Griggs." "Yes," Wade said. He didn't soften it. "What do you think he'll do?" Wade turned the coffee cup slowly in his hands. "He'll look for something that makes me a problem instead of a help. A rumor, maybe. Or something about my past that he can use." He paused. "I've moved around a lot. There's enough country between here and where I came from that a man can make a story out of the gaps if he wants to." Clara looked at him carefully. "Is there anything in the gaps?" He met her eyes. "Nothing I'm ashamed of. But gaps are gaps. Doesn't matter what's in them. What matters is what someone's willing to say is in them." "That's honest," she said. "I try to be." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "Wade, tell me something true about yourself. Not to defend yourself to me. Just something." He was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in Kansas," he said. "My father left when I was 9. My mother took in laundry. I was 12 when I started doing day work on neighboring farms to help with the rent, and 17 when I left and never went back, not because I didn't love her, but because there was nothing left for me to do there that helped either of us." He paused. "I've worked cattle from Texas to Montana. I've been cold and hungry and broke more times than I can count. I've had doors closed on me." He looked at her. "And I've had one person one time open one when it mattered. And that's the only thing I've ever tried to pass along." The lamp flickered. Clara sat with what he'd said and didn't try to fill it with anything. "What happened to her?" she said. "Your mother. She died in '89. A neighbor wrote to me. By the time the letter found me, it was too late." Something moved across his face. "Old pain well worn, the kind you've carried so long it no longer has sharp edges, but is still heavy. I got there in time for the grave, but not for her." "I'm sorry," Clara said. "It was a long time ago," he said. But he said it the way people say things that are still present, regardless of how long ago they happened. Clara looked at him, really looked the way she hadn't let herself look before, the way you look when you've stopped defending the looking. "I'm not lonely," she said. "What Griggs said. I want you to know that's not. I'm not desperate for company. I've been alone, and I've managed it." "I know that," he said. "I just want to be clear." "Clara." His voice was quiet. "I know. Believe me, I know." He held her gaze. "What I think, what I've thought since the first night, is that you're someone who's been carrying the full weight of everything by herself for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to set something down for a minute. That's not loneliness. That's exhaustion." He paused. "And there's no shame in it." She looked down at her coffee. Something in her chest had gone very still. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. Not accusatory, Just honest. Neither do I, he said. But I don't think we need to name it tonight. She looked up. He was watching her with those gray-blue eyes that never seemed to be asking for anything, and for the first time in 2 years, maybe longer. Clara Whitmore felt the specific terrifying relief of being seen by someone who didn't want anything back for the seeing. It was the most frightening thing that had happened to her all week. More frightening than Griggs, more frightening than the note in the dark, more frightening than any of it, because this she could not burn in the stove. The knock came at 7 the next morning. Not Wade's knock. She knew his knock by now, 3 even raps unhurried. This was different. Harder. The kind of knock that doesn't ask whether you're ready. She opened the door. Sheriff Dale Pruitt stood on her porch. Tom Pruitt's older brother. Eleanor's brother-in-law. He had the badge and the hat and the expression of a man who has been asked to do something he finds distasteful but has decided it falls within the boundaries of his job. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "Sheriff," she said. "What can I do for you? I need to ask you a few questions about the man who's been doing work on your property." He paused. "Wade Callahan." The cold air pressed in around the door. Clara kept her hand on the frame. "What kind of questions?" "The kind," Pruitt said carefully, "that come up when a man with no established identity in a town starts spending considerable time with a widow and her child." He had the decency to look uncomfortable saying it. "I want you to know, Clara, this isn't coming from me personally." "I know who it's coming from," she said. Pruitt's jaw shifted. He didn't deny it. "All the same," he said, "I've got to ask. Has he told you anything about where he came from? Whether he has family prior employment? Anything I can verify?" "He's told me the truth about himself," Clara said. "More truth than most people in this town offer without being asked." "Has he asked you for money? Made any claims about property or—" "Sheriff Pruitt." Her voice was flat now. "Wade Callahan fixed my roof. He fixed my pump. He had breakfast with my daughter 3 times, and she named a rabbit because of him. He has not asked me for a single thing in 3 weeks. Whatever Harold Griggs told you he needed you to find, you're not going to find it here." Pruitt stood very still. Then slowly he turned his hat in his hands. "You're sure about him, Clara?" "I'm sure of what I've seen," she said. "And I've been watching carefully." He nodded. Once. Slow. "All right." He put his hat back on. "I'll tell Griggs there's nothing actionable." "You tell Harold Griggs," Clara said, "whatever you need to tell him." She closed the door. She stood in her hallway with her back against the door and pressed her hands flat against her thighs and breathed. Just breathed. In and out, slow and steady, until the shaking in her chest settled. Lily appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. "Who was that, Mama?" "Nobody important, Lilybird." She pushed off the door. "Go wash your hands. Breakfast in 10 minutes." She went to the stove and started the fire. She did not let herself think about what Griggs was doing right now, about what he would try next, about the fact that he had sent the actual sheriff, to her door. She thought about oatmeal. She thought about water heating. She thought about her daughter's hands needing washing. She held on to the small true things, because the small true things were all she had between herself and the fear she refused to show. And then a knock at the door, 3 even raps, unhurried. She went to the door and opened it. Wade stood on the porch. He looked at her face. He read it the way he always read it, quickly, accurately, without making a production of what he found there. "What happened?" he said. She stepped back and let him in. "Griggs sent Pruitt," she said. Something went very still in his eyes. "He went to the sheriff," she said. "About you." Wade stood in her hallway with his hat in his hand and didn't say anything for a moment. Just stood. The stillness in him was different now. Not the peaceful stillness of a man at ease. The coiled stillness of a man deciding what comes next. "I'll go talk to Pruitt," he said. "Wade." "This doesn't have to fall on you," he said. I'll talk to him. I've got nothing to hide, and I'll tell him that directly, and he can verify whatever he needs to verify." He paused. "But Clara, after that, I think Griggs is going to push harder. This was a test, to see if the sheriff coming to your door would shake you." He looked at her. "Did it?" She held his gaze. "Ask me a harder question," she said. Something moved across his face, then something she hadn't seen there before. Warm and certain, and completely unguarded, just for a moment, before he put his hat back on and went to face what was coming. She stood in the doorway and watched him go. And somewhere in the cold yard near the fence post, Margaret the rabbit sat in her hollow of grass and did not move at all. Wade came back 2 hours later. Clara heard his boots on the porch and had the door open before he knocked. She looked at his face and read it the way she'd learned to read it quickly, without flinching from what she found there. What she found was controlled. Careful. The expression of a man who had just been somewhere unpleasant and was deciding how much of it to carry in with him. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She poured coffee. She sat across from him. She waited. "Pruitt's a decent man," Wade said finally. "He wasn't comfortable with any of it. You could see that." He turned the cup. "But Griggs has been in this town 40 years, and he knows where every lever is. Pruitt's up for re-election in the spring." Clara felt the weight of that settle onto the table between them. "What did Pruitt say?" she asked. "That he'd received a formal complaint. That a concerned citizen had suggested I might be operating under false representations. He said it evenly without heat. Griggs told him I could be a confidence man, that I'd targeted you specifically, that I was after the deed to your property." Clara set her cup down hard enough to make a sound. "That's a lie," she said. "Yes," Wade said. "It is." "You don't, Wade. This land is barely worth—" "I know that," he said, "and Pruitt knows that, but Griggs isn't making an argument. He's making noise. Loud enough and long enough that people start to wonder even when they know better." He looked at her directly. "I gave Pruitt 3 names in Kansas he can write to. Men I worked cattle with for years, a foreman, a ranch owner, a deputy sheriff in Dodge City. Any one of them will tell him exactly who I am. And until he hears back—" A pause. Just a beat. But she caught it. "Griggs asked Pruitt to ask me to keep my distance from your property while the inquiry is open," Wade said, "to avoid the appearance of no." The word came out of her flat and final. Wade looked at her. "No," she said again. "That is exactly what he wants. He wants you gone from here so I'm alone again and he can go back to deciding what I'm worth." She pushed back from the table and stood up. "I am not going to let Harold Griggs arrange my life from behind his counter." "Clara." His voice was careful. "If I keep coming here while Pruitt's got an open inquiry, it gives Griggs ammunition. He can say I ignored a lawful request. He can escalate. Can he actually make you leave town?" Wade was quiet for a moment. "Not yet. Not yet." 2 words that said everything about what was coming. Clara stood at the window and looked out at the yard where Lily was crouched near Margaret's fence post again, deeply engaged in a one-sided conversation with a rabbit that remained diplomatically silent. "I need to think," Clara said. "Take whatever time you need," he said. "Not about you," she said quickly. She turned. "I know what I think about you. I need to think about what I'm going to do." She looked at him. "Because I'm done reacting. I'm done standing in doorways waiting for Griggs to make his next move and then figuring out how to survive it." She felt something harden in her chest. Not anger, something past anger, something colder and more useful. "I want to get ahead of this." Wade studied her for a moment. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that Harold Griggs has been doing all of this in public, in the post office, through the sheriff, in front of audiences." She met his eyes. "And I haven't." He was very still. "You're going to do something public," he said. "I'm going to tell the truth," she said, out loud, where people can hear it. She paused. "Is that foolish?" "No," he said, and the way he said it, quiet and certain, steadied something in her that had been tipping. "Then finish your coffee," she said, "and keep coming to my door. Every morning, same as always." He looked at her for a long moment. "You sure?" he said. "I've been sure of very few things in my life," Clara said. "This is one of them." She didn't sleep well that night. Not from fear, she kept checking, and it wasn't fear. It was the particular wakefulness of a person who has made a decision and whose mind keeps turning it over, testing the seams, looking for the place it might come apart. She lay in the dark and listened to the wind and thought about Thomas. Not the grief of him she'd made her peace with that, or as much peace as a person makes with something that doesn't fully end. She thought about what he would have said. Thomas had been a quiet man, steady as creek water, with an absolute and unhesitating belief in Clara's judgment that she had sometimes taken for granted when he was alive and missed with a physical ache since he'd gone. He would have liked Wade. The thought arrived without warning and sat there solid and uncomplicated and a little startling. He would have liked Wade Callahan, the directness, the lack of performance, the way he worked without needing to be watched. Thomas had valued that above almost everything. He'd had no patience for men who needed an audience for their virtues. Clara pressed her palm flat against the mattress on Thomas's side. Cool. Empty. The way it had been for 2 years. "I'm all right," she said quietly to the empty room. To Thomas, or to herself, or to nobody. "I'm going to be all right." She believed it. That was new. 3 days passed. Wade came every morning. He didn't make a production of it, didn't arrive loudly, or leave conspicuously. He came, he worked, he ate oatmeal with Lily. He left in the afternoon. The routine of it was so ordinary that it had stopped feeling like anything except natural, and that naturalness was its own kind of answer to Griggs's accusations. You can't perform something every single day without it becoming real. On the 4th morning, Martha Hensley came by. Clara saw her coming up the walk and felt a flutter of something, not quite dread, but the anticipation of difficulty. Martha's expression was its own kind of weather forecast. She had the look of a woman carrying something heavy and not sure how to set it down. "He's gone too far," Martha said before she was fully through the door. Clara went still. "What did he do?" Martha came inside. She sat down at the kitchen table and folded her hands on top of it, the way she folded them in church, like she needed the anchor. "He went to Mrs. Patterson," she said. "Your sewing work." Clara felt something drop in her stomach. "He told her," Martha continued, "that employing you, giving you work, was enabling a situation that reflected poorly on the moral character of this town." She looked up. Her eyes were angry, in the way that decent people's eyes get angry when they've seen something indecent done by someone who should know better. "Mrs. Patterson is a gentle woman, Clara. She doesn't have the spine for confrontation. She sent a note this morning canceling the rest of the work." The kitchen was very quiet. Clara sat down. She was aware of her own breathing. In, out. The sound of Lily in the next room humming something to herself. Mrs. Patterson's work was 3 weeks of income. Not large, nothing in Clara's life was large but real. Enough to cover January. Enough to begin paying down the account at Griggs's store, which was its own bitter irony. Gone. Because Harold Griggs had decided to stop making noise and start doing damage. "He's escalating," Wade said from the doorway. Both women looked at him. He'd been coming up the path when Martha arrived and had apparently decided to wait outside until he understood the situation. He came in now, hat in hand, and looked at Clara with that direct, unhurried gaze. "I heard," he said. "I'm sorry." "This is because of me," he said, not a question. This is because of Harold Griggs, Clara said sharply. Yes, and because I'm here. He pulled out a chair and sat down. He set his hat on the table. Clara, I need to say something, and I need you to hear it without arguing with me for 30 seconds. She looked at him. If I leave, he said, Griggs stops. The pressure stops. You get your work back, you get your reputation back, and the town goes back to ignoring you the way it did before. He held her gaze. That's the clean solution. I don't like it, but it's real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. The kitchen was very still. Martha looked at her hands. Clara looked at Wade. And what do I get back exactly? She said. When you leave and Griggs stops and everything goes back to the way it was. What do I have? Safety, he said. Stability. Your income. I had all of that before, she said. I had it the night I walked out of his store with nothing. I had stability and safety and the whole town's respect, and I still stood on that porch in the cold with nowhere to go and no one to call. She leaned forward slightly. What you're describing, Wade, is the life I had before you came. And that life looked respectable from the outside, and it was so quiet, so careful, so small. Her voice was even. She wasn't performing. I am not going back to small. Martha made a small sound, not quite a word, but something. Wade looked at Clara for a long moment. Then we face it, he said. We face it, she said. He nodded once. All right, he said. Then here's what I think we do. What he thought they should do was simple. Not easy, simple, which is different. Simple things can require everything you have. He thought Clara should speak at the town meeting. Dustfall Creek held a public meeting the first Friday of every month in the schoolhouse, a frontier institution, part practical business, and part social ritual attended by most of the town's adults. The next one was in 4 days. You stand up, Wade said, and you say what's true. Not to defend me, I'll handle my own defense, but to say what's been done to you. What Griggs did at the store, the note under your door, Mrs. Patterson, all of it. People know most of it already, Clara said. Knowing and hearing are different, he said. Right now, the story in this town is the one Griggs is telling. A concerned citizen protecting the community from a suspicious drifter and a foolish widow. You stand up in that schoolhouse and you tell a different story, the true one, and you give people who already have doubts about Griggs somewhere to put those doubts. Martha looked up from her hands. He's right, she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. I've heard things, Clara. People who think Griggs has gone too far but don't know what to do with that. You give them something to stand behind, and some of them will stand. Clara looked at the table. She thought about standing up in front of the whole town. She thought about every eye in that room. She thought about her voice, which she had kept so carefully steady for so long, and whether it would stay steady when she needed it most. And if it doesn't work, she said. Then we know where we stand, Wade said, and we figure out what comes next from there. But at least you'll have stood up. He paused. At least it'll have been your choice. She looked at him. You won't be there alone, Martha said quietly. I'll be there. Clara looked at her. Martha met her eyes. I've known you for 4 years, Clara Whitmore. I've watched you manage things that would have broken most people and never once ask for help. And I've been guilty of the same thing everyone else in this town has been guilty of, watching you manage and calling it admirable when really I just didn't want to be inconvenienced. Her voice was rough at the edges. I'm done watching. Something cracked open in Clara's chest. She pressed her lips together hard. She would not cry at the kitchen table. Not now. Friday, she said. Friday, Wade said. The 4 days were the longest of her life, not because of fear she kept checking, and it still wasn't exactly fear. It was anticipation. The specific acute awareness of something coming that you can't speed up or slow down, that you can only move toward 1 hour at a time. Griggs heard about it, of course. News in Dustfall Creek moved faster than weather. By Wednesday, she knew he knew, because Eleanor Pruitt came to her door. Not the sheriff, this time Eleanor herself, which was its own kind of signal, and told her in a voice gone tight, with something that might have been genuine concern, or might have been a message from her brother-in-law, that people were talking about what Clara planned to say on Friday, and that it would be better for everyone if she reconsidered. "Better for everyone," Clara repeated. Eleanor had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "For you, Clara, for your daughter. You've got a child to think about. Public confrontation can have consequences." "Eleanor," Clara kept her voice even. "I've been having quiet consequences for 2 years. I'm ready to try the other kind." Eleanor left. That evening something happened that Clara hadn't expected. Ed Barker knocked on her door. Ed Barker, who had been in the store the night Griggs refused her. Ed Barker, who had said something low and rumbling to Eleanor Pruitt as Clara walked out. He stood on her porch with his hat in both hands, looking like a large man who had come to say something that cost him something. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "I heard you're going to speak Friday." "That's right," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I was in the store," he said, "that first night. When Griggs—" He stopped, tried again. "I didn't say anything. I should have." He looked at his hat. "I've got a wife and a daughter, and I kept thinking about what I'd want somebody to do if it was them standing at that counter." He looked up. "I'm going to be there Friday, and I'm going to stand up when you're done." Clara stared at him. He nodded once, the nod of a man who has said what he came to say and doesn't need anything back for saying it, and walked off her porch and down the lane. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she went inside and told Wade. He was quiet for a moment. "You see," he said, "you're not alone in this. You were never as alone as Griggs needed you to think you were." She sat down at the table. "I'm scared," she said. It was the first time she had said that exact word since Thomas died. She watched it land in the room and waited to feel ashamed of it. She didn't. Wade looked at her. "I know," he said. "That's all right." "Is it?" "Fear means it matters," he said. "Things that don't matter don't scare you." She looked at her hands on the table. "Will you be there?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Immediate. Certain. No conditions attached." She nodded. "Then I'll be ready," she said. Jamieg. Friday came cold and clear. The schoolhouse filled faster than Clara had ever seen it fill. By the time she and Wade arrived together, deliberately walking through the front door together, where anyone who wanted to see could see nearly every seat was taken. She felt the room shift when she entered. Not hostile, more complex than that. She felt Griggs across the room without looking at him, felt his presence the way you feel a weather system moving in. She felt Martha in the second row, who caught her eye and gave her a single small nod. She felt Ed Barker in the back arms, folded face unreadable. Wade sat beside her, his shoulder an inch from hers. That inch mattered. The meeting moved through its regular business with the specific, agonizing slowness of civic process, a fence dispute, a report on the well maintenance, a discussion about road conditions. Clara sat with her hands flat on her knees and her back straight and her face composed. She did not fidget. She did not look at Griggs. Then the moderator, old Jim Hale, who had been running these meetings since before Clara was born, cleared his throat and said that a citizen had requested floor time on a community matter, and he recognized Mrs. Clara Whitmore. She stood up. The room went so quiet she could hear the lamp wicks. She stood at the front of the schoolhouse and looked out at Dustfall Creek, all of it, everyone she'd lived among for 7 years, everyone who'd watched her husband die and her life narrow and her credit refused, and she felt something move through her that was bigger than fear and bigger than anger. It was clarity. 6 weeks ago, she said, I walked into Griggs' general store with 4 items on a list: flour, salt, dried beans, and lard. I asked for 3 weeks' credit. I had always paid my debts, every single one of them. Every person in this room knows that. Her voice was steady. Not loud, steady. Harold Griggs refused me, in front of witnesses. He told me a woman with no husband to stand behind her account was not a risk he was willing to take. She paused. He said that out loud, in his store, with people listening. And nobody said a word. The room was absolutely still. Then a stranger came out of the cold and helped me, she said. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't expect anything. He walked back into that store with me and stood at the counter and put my groceries on his account, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like a person instead of a problem. She looked directly at Griggs now for the first time since she'd walked in. And Harold Griggs has spent the 6 weeks since then trying to take that away from me. A note under my door. Pressure on my employer. A visit from the sheriff. All because a decent man helped me, and I didn't have the decency to be ashamed of it. Griggs stood up. Now hold on, he started. I'm not finished, Clara said. She said it quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Griggs sat back down. She looked back out at the room. I am not here to ask for your sympathy, she said. I am not here to ask for your help. I am here to say in front of all of you that what was done to me in that store and what has been done since was wrong. And the only reason it kept working as long as it did was because I was quiet about it. Because I thought quiet was the safe choice. She paused. I don't think that anymore. Silence. And then Ed Barker stood up. He was a big man. When he stood up in the back of that schoolhouse, people noticed. She's right, he said. His voice was rough. I was there that night. I heard what Griggs said, and I didn't speak up, and I should have. He looked around the room. I'm speaking up now. A beat. Then Martha Hensley stood. Then the Dawson boy from the livery. Then, and this one landed in the room like a stone through glass, Dale Pruitt stood up. The sheriff, slowly. With the expression of a man who has come to a decision he'd been avoiding, and is done avoiding it. I had a letter back from Dodge City this morning, Pruitt said quietly. About Wade Callahan. From a man named George Reeves, who ran cattle with him for 6 years. He paused. Everything Mr. Callahan said about himself checks out. Every word. He sat back down. The room turned to Griggs. Harold Griggs sat very still behind the expression of a man watching something he built fall down around him and not yet knowing what to do with his hands. Clara looked at him. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel vindication exactly. She felt something quieter and more durable than either of those things. She felt the ground under her feet, solid, real, hers. Thank you, she said to the room, and sat down. Wade's shoulder was still an inch from hers. That inch. She let herself feel it. They walked home in the dark, the 3 of them, because Lily had been left with Martha's youngest and collected on the way out, and now she walked between them with her hand in Clara's, and the other swinging free, talking without pause about whether Margaret would be awake when they got home. Rabbits sleep at night, Wade said. How do you know? Lily said. I've spent a lot of nights outdoors, he said. You notice what's moving and what isn't. Lily considered this. Were you ever scared at night? Outdoors? Sure, he said. What did you do? He was quiet for a moment. I kept moving, he said. And I watched for good things. And I waited for morning. Lily thought about that with the serious, thorough consideration she gave to everything that mattered. That's good advice, she said finally. I had a good teacher, he said. Clara looked at him over Lily's head. He looked back. And in that look, just that, no words, no grand declaration, was something that had been building for 6 weeks, in coffee cups and frozen pumps and early mornings, and the specific, unrepeatable kindness of a man who helped without asking for a receipt. Something that had no name yet. But both of them felt it, and neither of them looked away. The morning after the town meeting, Dustfall Creek woke up different. Not dramatically. Not the way things change in stories where everyone suddenly sees the light and gathers in the street to celebrate. Real towns don't work that way. Real people change slowly sideways in the private space between what they said last week and what they're willing to say this week. But different all the same. Clara felt it when she walked to the post office. The way Mrs. Dawson from the dry goods nodded at her, not the careful guarded nod of someone managing a complicated social transaction, but an actual nod. The kind between equals. The kind that costs nothing because it doesn't have conditions attached. She felt it when Jim Hale tipped his hat at the corner of Main and 2nd and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," with the full weight of a man who means it, small things, but in a life that had been defined for 2 years by the accumulated weight of small things going wrong, small things going right had a power she hadn't anticipated. She bought her mail. She walked home. She thought about what came next. What came next was Griggs. Because Harold Griggs did not disappear after a town meeting the way a problem disappears when you finally name it out loud. He was still there behind his counter in his store with his ledger and his 40 years of influence. A public moment doesn't erase a man like that. It just changes the shape of what he's willing to do openly. Clara understood that. She wasn't foolish enough to think the meeting had ended it. She was right. Wade was fixing the fence line on the north side of her property when Ed Barker came down Birch Road on foot, which was unusual enough that Clara looked up from the kitchen window and knew immediately it wasn't a social call. She went to the door before he knocked. "Ed," she said. He pulled his hat off. He looked like a man who had come from somewhere uncomfortable and was about to deliver news from it. "Clara, is Callahan here?" "He's at the fence," she said. "What happened?" Ed turned his hat. "Griggs went to the land office this morning," he said. "First thing, asked about the title on your property." He looked at her steadily. "He's claiming Thomas had an outstanding loan against this land when he died, saying the debt transferred and hasn't been settled." The world went very quiet. "That's not true," Clara said. "I know it's not true," Ed said. "Tom Pruitt knows it's not true. But Griggs brought a piece of paper, Clara. I don't know what it says or where he got it. But he brought paper and he filed a challenge." He stopped turning his hat. "He's trying to take your land." Clara stood in the doorway and felt the ground under her feet, that same solid, real ground she had felt at the schoolhouse last night, and she held on to it. She pressed her feet into it through her boots, and she held on. "Go get Wade," she said. The three of them sat at the kitchen table, Clara, Wade, and Ed Barker, and Ed laid it out as plainly as he knew how. Griggs had produced a document claiming Thomas Whitmore had borrowed $400 from a private creditor in 1887 using the Birch Road property as collateral. The creditor, according to the document, had since assigned the debt to a holding company. Griggs had presented himself as the representative of that company. Wade listened to all of it without moving. When Ed finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. $400, Wade said. "That's what the paper says," Ed said. "Thomas never borrowed $400, Clara said. Her voice was flat. "He was careful about debt, almost to a fault. He kept every record, every transaction, every payment, every receipt. I have the ledger books in the trunk in the bedroom." She looked at Wade. "He never borrowed against this land. I would know." "I believe you," Wade said. He looked at Ed. "How long does Griggs have to make the claim stand up?" "Land office gives 30 days for a counter-challenge," Ed said. "You'd need documentation, proof the debt doesn't exist." "I have documentation," Clara said. She was already standing. "Thomas's ledger books go back to '84. Every dollar in, every dollar out. If he'd borrowed $400 against this property, it would be in there." She looked at Ed. "Would that hold at the land office?" "It'd hold better than whatever paper Griggs produced," Ed said. "Man like Griggs doesn't make a move like this unless he thinks you can't counter it. Which means he thinks you either don't have the records or you don't know what to do with them." Clara looked at Wade. "I know what to do with them," she said. She went to the bedroom and came back with Thomas's ledger books. 3 of them worn leather covers, the pages dense with her husband's careful handwriting. She set them on the table and opened the first one, and for a moment just looked at the handwriting. Thomas's handwriting steady, deliberate, the handwriting of a man who believed that if something was worth writing down, it was worth writing down clearly. She had not opened these books since the month after he died. Her throat tightened. She did not let it stop her. Wade moved his chair beside hers and looked at the pages, with her not taking over, not directing, just present. Looking where she looked. Here, she said after 20 minutes. She put her finger on a page from 1887. Every transaction for that year. Land payment to the county in March. Seed purchase in April. Lumber in June. She moved her finger down the column. No loan, no creditor, no $400. She turned pages. And here look, he notes specifically in October of '87 that the land title is clear and unencumbered. He wrote it out, dated it, signed it. She looked up at Ed. Why would a man write that in his personal ledger if it wasn't true? Ed studied the page. His jaw shifted. He wouldn't, he said. Nobody writes that down unless they had reason to be specifically sure of it. Wade said quietly. He knew his property was clear, and he wanted the record to say so. Ed straightened. I'll take this to Jim Hale, he said. Jim's on the county land board. He knows what a genuine record looks like. He paused. Griggs is going to push back. Let him push, Clara said. Ed looked at her for a moment, the same look he'd had on her porch the night before the meeting, the look of a man recalibrating something. Then he nodded, picked up his hat, and went. The kitchen went quiet. Clara sat with the ledger open in front of her, Thomas's handwriting, covering the page, and felt the strange doubled quality of the moment, grief and determination occupying the same space, neither one canceling the other out. He kept good records, Wade said. He kept everything, Clara said. He used to say a man who doesn't know exactly where he stands financially is a man who's lying to himself. Wade was quiet for a moment. He sounds like someone worth knowing. Clara looked at the page. He was, she said. He really was. She closed the ledger carefully. She set her hand on the cover. Thank you, Thomas, she said quietly. She didn't feel strange saying it. She felt entirely clear. The counter-challenge took 11 days. 11 days of waiting, which Clara endured the way she endured most hard things, by keeping her hands busy and her mind focused on the next immediate task and the one after that. She took on new sewing work from 2 women who had been at the town meeting and had come to her door the following week with fabric and an implicit, unspoken apology stitched into the way they asked. She fixed the loose board on the back porch herself, with Wade talking her through it from the bottom of the ladder, refusing to climb up and do it for her. This is ridiculous, she said from the roof of the porch. You're standing down there watching me struggle. You're not struggling, he said. You've got it. 2 more inches to the left. I could have been done 20 minutes ago if you'd just... You'll know how to do this next time, he said. That's worth 20 minutes. She wanted to argue. She was right about the 20 minutes, and she knew it. But she also, somewhere under the irritation, understood what he was doing. He was not building her a porch. He was building her the knowledge of how to build her own porch. That was a different thing entirely. She drove the nail. It held. There, he said. Don't, she said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to say you did a good job, he said mildly. But if you'd prefer, I keep it to myself. Don't keep it to yourself, she said, and climbed down the ladder. He was smiling when she reached the bottom. She'd seen that almost smile before, the faint thing that lived at the corner of his mouth when something genuinely pleased him. But this was fuller than usual, less guarded, the smile of someone who has stopped being careful about being seen. She stood at the bottom of the ladder and looked at him close enough that she could see the gray in his eyes clearly, and something passed between them that was past conversation, and past politeness, and past the careful management of something not yet named. She took 1 step toward him. He didn't step back. "Wade," she said. "Clara," he said. "Stay," she said. "Not just through the winter. Not just until the roof is fixed and the pump works and Griggs gives up. Stay." He looked at her for a long moment, that long, direct look that never asked for anything, and somehow, that was the very thing that made it ask for everything. "That's a big word," he said quietly. "I know what it means," she said. "I've been saying small words for 2 years, and I've decided I'm done with that." His jaw shifted slightly. Something moved across his face, deep and real, the kind of thing that happens in a person's expression when they've been given something they stopped expecting a long time ago. "Lily," he said, not objecting, just naming the most important fact. "Lily adores you," Clara said. "You know that." "I know it," he said. "And that matters to me more than—" He stopped, tried again. "I'm not easy company, Clara. I've been moving my whole life. I don't know if I know how to stop." "I watched you fix my roof," she said. "My wall, my pump, my fence, the back porch." She met his eyes. "You stop just fine. You just need something worth stopping for." He was very still. "Are you sure?" he said. "Ask me a harder question," she said. He recognized his own words coming back to him. Something in his face broke open, not dramatically, just that easing, that specific undoing of a long-held, careful thing, and he reached out and took her hand. His hand was large and calloused and warm, and he held hers like something he intended to keep, and that was all that was enough. That was the whole of it. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. The land office ruled in Clara's favor on a Tuesday in late January. Jim Hale delivered the news himself, came to her door in the afternoon with the official paper in hand and the expression of a man who has done the right thing and knows it and is glad. Thomas's ledger records had been examined by 2 independent assessors. The debt Griggs claimed did not exist and had never existed. The document Griggs produced was ruled insufficient to stand against Clara's primary records. The challenge was dismissed. The land was hers. Hers clean and unencumbered, exactly as Thomas had written in his ledger in October of 1887. Clara held the paper in both hands and read it twice. Jim Hale waited hat in hand with the patience of a man who understands that some moments need to be felt before they're talked about. "Thank you, Jim," she said finally. "You did the work," he said. "Those ledger books were the whole case." He paused. "Thomas kept good records." "He did," she said. After Hale left, she stood in her kitchen and held the paper and allowed herself exactly 1 full minute of feeling the whole weight of the last 2 months. All of it. The cold store and the note under the door and the sheriff on her porch and Mrs. Patterson's cancellation and 11 days of waiting. And then she set the paper on the table and went to put the kettle on. Lily came in from outside with red cheeks and cold hands, and the news that Margaret had been spotted at the far end of the fence, which was a record distance from her usual spot, and represented what Lily considered a significant expansion of territory. "She's getting braver," Lily said. "Sounds like it," Clara said. "Maybe she just needed to know it was safe out there," Lily said with the breezy certainty of a child who has arrived at a truth without knowing it. Clara looked at her daughter. "Maybe," she said. Griggs didn't come to her. She hadn't expected him to. Men like Griggs didn't apologize, they receded. They pulled back from what had failed and waited for the next opportunity with the patience of people who believe the world fundamentally owes them something and are simply biding their time until it pays up. He was still there behind his counter, and he would be there a long time yet. That was the truth of it. But something had changed in the architecture of his power, because the town had watched Clara Whitmore stand up in the schoolhouse. They had watched Ed Barker stand behind her and Martha Hensley and Dale Pruitt with his letter from Dodge City. They had watched the land challenge fail, and the accumulated weight of all that watching had shifted something in the way Dustfall Creek understood the story, Not completely, not permanently, but enough. Enough that when Clara walked into Griggs' general store in the first week of February, the bell above the door jingled, and Harold Griggs looked up, and what passed across his face was not the recalculating look of a man deciding how much she was worth. It was something smaller and less certain than that. Clara walked to the counter. She set down her list. She set down cash, real money, sewing income enough to cover half her account balance. "Against my account," she said. Griggs looked at the money. He looked at her list. He began filling the order. He did not speak about the town meeting. He did not speak about the land challenge. He did not speak about Wade. Neither did she. Some things don't require words to be understood. Some reckonings happen in the space between what is said and what is simply finally known by everyone in the room. She collected her goods. She paid for what she owed. She walked out. The bell jingled. She didn't look back. Spring came late that year, the way spring always came to Montana, reluctant, arguing with winter all the way to April, giving ground in inches rather than yards. But it came, and with it, the particular quality of light that made everything look possible again. That thin, clear, optimistic light of a northern spring that lands differently than any other season's light, like the world has just remembered what it's capable of. Wade had stayed through all of it. He'd moved out of Calloway's boarding house in February and taken over the repairs on the small outbuilding behind Clara's property, which he was slowly transforming into something livable, not with urgency, not with announcement, just steadily, the way he did everything. Board by board, day by day. He slept there. He ate most meals at Clara's table. He worked the property, and in the afternoons, helped Ed Barker at the feed mill, which gave him income, and gave Ed Barker something he hadn't had before, a reliable man he could count on, which was its own currency in a frontier town. People had stopped calling him the widow's man. They called him Wade now. Just Wade. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. The morning Lily called him Pa was a Thursday in April. Clara was at the stove. Wade was at the table with a cup of coffee and the look of someone who has been up since before dawn and is comfortable with it. Lily came out of the bedroom in her nightgown, with her hair wild and her eyes still half closed, and she walked directly to Wade and leaned against his arm, the way she always did in the morning, and she said without looking up, without thinking about it, without any awareness that she was saying anything remarkable, "Pa, is it warm enough today for Margaret to come out further?" The kitchen went absolutely still. Clara stopped stirring. Wade went very quiet. Lily looked up at him and seemed to register for the first time that something had changed in the quality of the air around her. She looked at Wade's face. Then she looked at Clara's back. Then she looked back at Wade. "Is that wrong?" she said. Small voice. Uncertain. Wade looked at Clara. Clara turned around. She looked at her daughter, this 7-year-old girl who had eaten 2 bowls of soup on the first night and set a bowl across from herself without asking permission, and made a decision about who belonged at her table before any adult in the room had been brave enough to make it. "No, Lilybird," Clara said. Her voice was rough at the edges. She didn't try to smooth it. "That's not wrong." Lily looked back at Wade, waiting. Wade set his coffee down. He looked at this small person leaning against his arm in her wild-haired morning state, and something moved across his face that had no name and needed none. "I think she'll be out today," he said. "It's warm enough." Lily considered this with her usual thoroughness. Then she nodded satisfied and went to the sink to wash her hands for breakfast. Clara and Wade looked at each other over her head. No words. No words were necessary, because some things don't happen in the moment. They're declared, they happen in the accumulation of mornings. In the coffee on the table, and the fixed fence, and the oatmeal, and the rabbit named Margaret, and the nail, driven 2 inches to the left, and the hand held in a cold yard, and the shoulder an inch away, in a schoolhouse full of people choosing sides. They happen slowly, and then they are simply true, and then they have always been true. In May, Wade asked Clara to marry him. He did it badly. He said so himself after. He had planned something, he'd clearly thought about it. She could see the evidence of planning in his expression and his posture, and the way he'd asked Lily to go check on Margaret right before, which Lily had done with suspicious enthusiasm. But when it actually came to the moment, all the planning went out of him, and he just stood in the kitchen and said, "I want to stay. For good. I want to Clara. I want to be where you are. I want to be Lily's." He stopped. Started again. "I'm asking you to marry me. I know I did that poorly, but that's what I'm asking." Clara looked at him. "That," she said, "was genuinely terrible." He let out a breath. "I know." "You fixed an entire roof," she said. "You talked me off a ladder. You faced down Harold Griggs in a post office without raising your voice. And that's what you have." "I'm better with my hands than my words," he said. "You know that about me." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had come out of the cold on the worst night of her year and said no one who fights this hard should go home empty, and had meant it without condition or qualification or a single thing asked in return. This man who had stayed. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes." "That was your whole speech," she said. "Yes, is my whole answer. We're even." Something broke open in his face, full and unguarded, the smile she'd been watching arrive in pieces for 5 months, finally arriving all at once, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger and less careful and entirely himself. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and took both her hands. They stood like that in the kitchen that had once been too quiet and too cold and too small, and outside through the window the May light was coming in clear and thin and optimistic, and somewhere in the yard Lily was crouched near the fence post telling Margaret about the developments, and Margaret for once was listening. They married in June. Simple. At the church on 2nd Street with Martha Hensley in the front row and Ed Barker at the back, and Jim Hale standing up for Wade and Lily in a dress Clara had made from blue fabric bought with her own money paid for in full at Griggs' General Store, where Harold Griggs had wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with string and said not a single word that required a response. Dale Pruitt shook Wade's hand after the ceremony. "Welcome to Dustfall Creek," he said. "Thank you," Wade said. "I think I'm already here." By August, the homestead was running properly for the first time in 2 years. By September, Lily had started school and come home every day with things to report, mathematical, social, moral, and delivered them to both Clara and Wade with equal expectation that both would listen, because both always did. By October, Wade had taken on a partnership with Ed Barker at the feed mill, and Clara had more sewing work than she could manage alone, which was a problem she had never expected to have, and found she didn't mind at all. And on a cool evening in early November, Clara sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee going cold in her hands, and listened to the sound of Wade and Lily inside Lily's voice, running rapid and certain through some story, Wade's voice asking the right questions at the right moments, and she felt the particular complete quality of a life that has found its shape. Not a perfect shape. Not the shape she'd planned. The shape that had come from standing in a cold street on the worst night of December and saying yes to a stranger's help and meaning it, and not going back on it no matter what the town said, or what notes got pushed under her door, or what Harold Griggs tried to do from behind his counter. The shape that came from choosing every single day to see clearly and stand in what she saw. She pressed her palm flat against the porch railing, the railing Wade had fixed in March, the one she'd watched him fix with her own eyes, and could have fixed herself if she'd needed to. She knew that now. She could fix it herself. She also didn't have to. Inside, Lily laughed at something loud and unself-conscious, the laugh of a child who is completely safe. Clara closed her eyes. She heard the door open behind her, felt the warmth of him before he sat down beside her. "She's asleep," Wade said. "Already." "She talked herself out," he said. "There was a lot of ground to cover." Clara smiled. They sat together in the November quiet, the good kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, the The kind that means everything is where it's supposed to be. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Because kindness offered once without condition in the cold to someone who needed it and almost didn't take it can build a whole life. Not in spite of the hard parts, because of them.